Hello everyone, and welcome to part 4 of building a simple Dropbox clone. In the last video, we added folder creation, but whenever we try and go into a folder that's other than our homepage, we get an error. In this video, we'll implement viewing folders. We'll create a new route to display specific folder content. To do so, inside of our routes folder, we'll add a new folder called folder, and inside of which we'll add one called id.tsx. id has to be with square brackets. We want our id to be in square brackets since it's a dynamic route which we will be using to render folders based on their IDs. We need a few imports. The page props so that we can pass data to our page prop, and the handlers from Fresh, the layout component and the table folder component, since we're going to reuse the same display as the home page, our folder and page folder interfaces, and a few database functions, getting files by parent ID, folders by parent ID, getting the specific folder and saving that folder. Next, we'll create our handlers, which will return an object of type page folder. For the get handler, we can access the route ID from the context. This ID exists because our route is called ID. If we take a look at our route, it's ID in square brackets. So if, for example, this was called something else, like pizza, then we would have access to a pizza parameter. Whenever we hit this route, since it's under folder, whatever this is, this would be represented by the variable that we decided to call our route. So in our case, this would be ID. That's what we would get from it. So this ID is going to represent our folder ID, which we can use to call the get folder and to get that specific folder by ID. If the result is null, we return a not found. Otherwise, we get all the folders that have this ID as the parent folder, and we do the exact same thing for the files. Now we have all the data that we need. We put it inside of our page folders object, and we call the context render function, passing it our object. This will let us have access to all this data in our page props. With Fresh version 1.3, they've simplified things so that we don't need to do all of this inside of a get handler. But since we're still working with 1.2, we can't use it. If you happen to be using 1.3 or above, this get handler way should still work as well. It's just more code. We also need a post handler to deal with folder creation. This will work very similar to the homepage post handler. We could technically refactor things to avoid code duplication, but it's the only other place we're doing it, so it's not that big of a deal. We first get the form data from the request. Then we extract the folder input field from that form. We check the length to make sure that it's not empty, otherwise we return a 400 error. Then we create a new folder object with a random ID, the folder const as the name, and the ID from the context param as the parent folder. We save that folder, and then we redirect the user to the newly created folder. Finally, we can export our page component called folder page, which takes in a page props of type page folders. We return a JSX element which uses our layout component and displays the table folder by passing it the subfolders and subfiles that we got from the props. If we hit save, we should be able to navigate to the folders that we created last time without any issues. So let's refresh this. If we hit movies, we should see now we're correctly displaying our layout, and obviously movies doesn't have any folders or files inside of it, so it's just empty. Now if we go back, go to books, same thing, and we can create more folders. So let's go to movies. I'll create another folder called Nicolas Cage, hit submit. We see that the ID changed. Now if we go to the home page, go to movies, we should see a folder called Nicolas Cage. Now if we go inside of Nicolas Cage, we can keep going and creating folders infinitely. So we could create one called Lord of War, and if we go to our home page, we should see movies, books, click in movies, we see Nicolas Cage, click in Nicolas Cage, we see Lord of War, click in that, and it's empty. One annoying thing is that we don't really know in which folder we're in. I would like to have a breadcrumb type component under our navbar to tell us where we are and giving us a way to go back to the parent folder. So let's create something like that. Inside of our components folder, we'll create a new file called breadcrumbs.tsx. This will represent our breadcrumb component. For breadcrumbs, there's different ways of doing it. In a folder object, we have the information about the folder itself and the parent folder ID. We could use that to recursively get all the parent folders until the home folder, and we could display all of these in the breadcrumbs. But I kind of decided to avoid all that and just simplify it by using the folder ID, the parent folder ID, as a way to traverse the folder structure. So we would just display two things: the current folder name and the previous folder, which is the parent ID. So let's import the folder interface and create a props interface for our breadcrumb, which will have a field folder of type folder or null. If it's null, we'll assume that we're in the home page and our breadcrumb will just display home, since it doesn't have any previous parent folder. Next, we export our page component called breadcrumb. It takes in our breadcrumb props. We return the JSX element. Our breadcrumb will be a nav with an ordered list. To display the list items, we first have to know if the folder is null or not. So we use brackets to inject some TypeScript. In the case that the folder is actually null, we display a single list item called home, which will redirect to the home page. Otherwise, we'll display two items. The first is the parent folder called prev. For the href, we want to check if the parent folder equals home. Then we redirect to the home page. Otherwise, we redirect to the folder/parent folder ID. For the second item, we'll display the current folder's name so that we know where we are. The href link will redirect to the folder/folder ID. So this should technically just redirect to the same page that we're currently on. We also add an icon before the link to display a chevron, just to distinguish the prev link from this one. You can get this from the description from the GitHub repo for this package. And that's our breadcrumb component. Let's implement it in our layout. If we head over to our layout component, right before the create button component, we can add our new breadcrumb component. Don't forget to import it. Now our component takes a folder props. So we'll update the layout props interface to include this this folder of type folder, which we'll import, or null. And we need to pass that to our breadcrumb. So we'll just do folder equals props dot folder. Another thing we need to do is to pass this new field, this new layout props folder field, wherever the layout component is used. So let's head into the index route first. And we can see that we have an error message here since this is expecting a folder. Since we're already in the home page and we don't have any parent folder ID, we'll just use null here. And if we go to our folder ID route, we see we have the same error. So we'll add folder, and we already have the information inside of our props since page folders contains the current folder we're looking at, which is exactly what we want. So we'll call props.data.current folder. Now if we hit save, go to our app, we should now see our new breadcrumbs component telling us that we're inside of the Lord of War folder, and we have a previous folder which will take us to the parent folder. Now we see we're inside of Nicolas Cage, which contains Lord of War. If we go back again, we're inside of movies, which contains Nicolas Cage, and then we're back to home, which only displays the home. There's only one thing missing from our simple Dropbox clone: uploading files. We have this upload component that currently just does nothing but console log the file. In the next video, we'll store that file in Supabase, and we'll also store some of the file's information in Deno KV so that we can quickly display the file name and know in which folder it belongs to. We'll also add a way to view the file's content from our web app. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.